as you say, it is reminiscent of Opium Wars too.
It's absolutely. I've said all the way along. This is the Viking raiding party. That they're all getting together. No one believed me, and he also says at one point that we need ideas. What we're not getting is the discussion. We're not getting complex ideas. Well, the not so complex ideas that I would like them to discuss honestly is another way out of this problem is cheap energy from Russia and peaceful trade with China. Why don't you put that in your opium pipe and smoke it, Tony? But they won't.
Welcome, everyone. It's Jeff Rich here from the Birding Archive, and joining me today from Britain, the wonderful... Oh, hang on. The wonderful Anna Chen, even more wonderful in solo shot, of course, but Anna Chen, writer, poet, performer, and most importantly, political analyst, author of Shakedown, tracing...
Shakedown, Timeline of America's 21st Century War on China, which I started at the beginning of the century, basically, in real time.
And that's, in a way, what we're going to be talking about today, but with a focus on the interpretation, I guess, of particularly US-China or Western, particularly US-China relationships after the Trump-Xi summit. And I guess you could almost call it narrative wars about who won and what it all meant that have been going on since, but also have a bit of a look at the role of women in Chinese politics and culture. And since you are there in Britain right now, and there appears to be something of a political crisis, we're also going to have a bit of a chat about Britain and, its special relationship with the United States perhaps as well. So, Anna, the Trump-Xi meeting happened a week or two ago. What was your assessment of the significance of this meeting and I guess as well as the actual meeting itself, I guess the different interpretations people have been offering of who won and what it all means about the directions of the world?
Well, my first thought was, all this for a baked apple? He arrives...
Is that all there is?
He arrives with this huge entourage, and it's been built up for months, hasn't it? It was supposed to have taken place weeks ago. And he obviously thought he was going to arrive with a strong hand, but in fact he doesn't even have a full deck, if you know what I mean. So he arrives with all these tech bros, and it's a sort of, it's more like a holiday break. It's a curiosity thing. You've got Elon Musk there with his camera making like a tourist. You've got that incredibly embarrassing lineup where she's sort of, Trump's already has met. She's top people. Was there a woman? There might have been. I think there was a woman or two there. Anyway, so she introduces Trump to them. He then has to go and inspect and say hello to to his admin, and it was just embarrassing. I mean, they all looked guilty as sin for starters. You had Hexeth, who was like, really shuffling and looking down like as if he was about to meet the headmaster, who was going to call him out on being such an idiot. You've got Marco Rubio, who shouldn't have been there anyway because he's been sanctioned, so they had to schmiggle that somehow. And he winks at Trump, and now he knows all the cameras of the world are on them at this point. So what was the point of that? It's childish. What was he trying to signal? It was just sort of arrogant. They looked like frat boys. They reminded me of the frat boys in Animal House. And so she, keeps his dignity. He meets Voldemort. What was his name? Steve Miller.
Stephen Miller, yeah.
And there's that sort of longish Well, they said it was long. I don't think it was that long, but all of them are sort of smirking and trying to put up this air of bravado. So I think that all said it from the start. And then at the end of the line, there's Eric Trump, really excited, like a panting puppy, actually quite looking forward to meeting Xi. So I thought that sort of, set the atmosphere. You've got Xi, who's like a swan. I'm sure his feet are paddling away, madly underneath, but there's just this sort of equanimity, there's this calmness. You're sort of much more attracted to him. And I think there you have the story of both superpowers, really. One is calm, reliable, and stable, and the other one belongs in a stable, to borrow from Cheers. And what did they get? So Jensen Huang manages to hitch a ride on Air Force One. But while he's actually there, what we know now is that Huawei had yet to make their announcement, which they just made a couple of days ago, that by 2031 they're going to be creating 1.4 nanometers, their chips, which is only lagging behind TSMC by 3 years. So there's this race to get, the chips smaller and smaller. But it also means they won't need the machines from the Netherlands, because the Netherlands have been using them as blackmail, as leverage against China. So that's all looking good. And poor Jensen Huang went back without a deal. In fact, I think Xi has now, because he's prioritizing homemade chips in order that they can't be blackmailed by America, he's put a lot of emphasis on that. And I think he's actually banned the import of some of these chips. The Boeing was expecting a deal of 600 airplanes. Then they had to put up with 200, and even the 200 planes that apparently, are in some doubt. From the very first moment, Trump being met by, a lower rank official, not Xi, but also it wasn't like even Wang Yi or anybody like that. It was someone who, well, I hadn't heard of him. If you compare that to Putin, when Putin left, there's even like this painting of him and Xi.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. You couldn't make it more clear, who was more valuable.
Yeah.
So you were talking about the Thucydides trap, and asking.
Because, I guess I was interested also in your assessment of what China's approach to it. Because certainly it seems the shallowness of US diplomacy was exposed a little bit, and they didn't get much out of it. But what was your read of the Chinese sort of performance and objectives, I guess, in the meeting? Because there has been a lot of debate around that, and a debate around just exactly what Xi meant when he referred to the Thucydides trap.
I thought the Chinese really looked bored and jaded throughout the whole thing, but they had to go through the motions or wading through something unpleasant. And when I think he had to mention the Thucydides trap, mainly because it's what the Pentagon, what all these guys. I think the Naval Academy. I think it's compulsory reading, isn't it, for them? Yeah. The reason a lot of the latecomer commentators presented it, they thought it was some, vitally significant, important document that they've only just discovered, is because they weren't around in 2017 when Graham Allison's book came out. So that for those of us who had been paying attention, I didn't read the whole thing, but I read a lot of the commentary around it. And I also knew of the Thucydides trap, because Herman Wouk, wasn't it, in 1980, when he first... Oh, really? Yeah, he coined the term.
He coined the term. He's like a fiction writer, isn't he? Yeah, is that right?
He gave us the Cane Mutiny, with that wonderful scene of Humphrey Bogart with the strawberries,
Yeah.
where in the courtroom scene where he starts to really panic and he sweats because he's got it wrong. Oh, go and watch that scene, because that applies so much to what's happening with the Americans. But anyway, so Herman Wouk, he gives a speech to one of the military institutions, so that's where that comes from, and that is why, you know, the same guys who are reading Art of War, the testosterone bros, you know, it's one of the things that you have to read. So this is saying, well, I'm not even sure that Graham Allison was saying it was inevitable. I thought, my impression was at the time, 2017, that he was raising it as an example of why America should not go into conflict with China.
That's absolutely right. I mean, his basic argument was it was like a call for the sort of noblesse oblige of American statesmanship, in a way, to sort of have the dignity and the grace to, give China a dignified second place in the world, while America retains primacy. Without a war, it's this very common thing in American political culture. As you say, like, it's all taught in the naval colleges, and they all read Halford Mackinder and all this sort of stuff. And it's this sort of cartoon version of ancient history where, it sort of dignifies some pretty basic ideas, and the Thucydides Trap is really a pretty basic idea. So is your read that she was referring to it to, I guess, appeal to that known element in talk your opponent's language?
No, I think he was trying to speak their language, but another reason why it's not inevitable is that I believe there was no war between Athens and Rome.
Athens and Sparta,
The Peloponnese War was between Athens and Sparta, but obviously it's a lot more complicated than the way it's set out. But if it was inevitable that a rising power has to clash with the old one, then why wasn't there the same thing happening between Rome and Athens? So it's an interesting point. These things can happen. So I thought she was absolutely right to bring it up, so that they're sort of talking from the same playbook, and it's also saying that he understands where they're coming from and what their thinking is. I'm sure somebody like Elbridge Colby, I'm sure that he's got that on his bedside table, alongside the Art of War.
I mean, it really is a absolutely crappy book, but I wrote a longer piece on my Substack about it one time, so if people are interested, they can read that. But I guess behind it, there was an element of concern in some quarters, at least, about the way in which this got raised, and perhaps also the way some of the Chinese media, some of the, I guess, China-affiliated alternative media were commenting on it, whether it reflected a view that China and the USA could be the sort of co-hegemons of the world, the sort of two-empire world. Is that how you read the sort of discussion or the intent in China?
I thought she was just saying we can both exist in this world. And people got very upset that he might have been saying that you're a decaying force. Well, I think there are plenty of American commentators who've acknowledged that. Look at the social decay. Look at what is happening. The fact that they're getting into all these wars, the fact that somebody like Donald Trump can be elected not just for a first time, but for a second time, ushered in by Biden, of course. And I also think that Biden, the Democrats, wanted somebody like Trump in so that he could do all their dirty work and they could keep their hands lily white. But yes, do they want to carve the world up as two hegemons? I don't think that's true. But what I do believe, and this is something that's really hit me with this reading the Tony Blair essay today, and I think it's always been clear, the question is, can you reason with America? Can you, appeal to their better nature and all that? My rock bottom feeling is that America is going to continue on this path. There are some parties like the Duran says the neocons have no reverse gear, and I think they're absolutely right in that. But what they're not asking is why. What is giving this away? And I think, delving into history again, if you look at how did the West, the Industrial Revolutions, get capitalized in the first place? Well, that will be the Opium Wars. If you think that the number of countries, that after Britain had waged these wars to nobble China and to force them to take very cheap, mass-produced opium that had been grown in stolen Bengal, and make profits that way. Also, it meant that the silver that they didn't have to go to a middleman to buy all the chinoiserie that the upcoming British middle classes had fallen in love with. So a lot of that money, so it's not just Britain. So Britain kicks it off, but America is the second largest beneficiary of this. And you think of all the families, the dynasties, the East Coast dynasties, who were established because of the opium trade, the Delanos, Forbes, Perkins, Russell, Astor, a whole load of them. And this money gets invested. And what does it get invested in? Well, it goes into railways, it goes into banking, it goes into the big trading companies. So you have the basis of American wealth being made because they screwed over China the first time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, there's actually a great cartoon from around about 1900. I think it's around about the time of the Boxer Rebellion. And the headline is Uncle Sam puts his foot down, and it shows Uncle Sam, the United States, reading the riot act to all the other European powers carving up China. So if, the idea that the United States is not part of the sort of European entry into China in the 19th century is quite a myth, really. But
they were one of the 8-nation alliance, of course, during the Boxer Revolution in 1900 that put that down, as we know from Charlton Heston in the Boxer. I'm going to have to. I did a review of the Boxer Rebellion movie, Hollywood movie. I think I'm going to have to do that to camera.
Yeah.
I will give that a reading. So America made a fortune from China. So the idea that they're now blaming everything on China is just a big joke. These are people who do not know their history. So no wonder they have this grip on the Thucydides Trap to prove that they have some intellectual worth. So because they did that the first time, and it was a success for America. Since the 2008 crash, I think that was a huge wake-up call for American capitalism, because China actually saved American capitalism by acting as the shock absorber, using its huge reserves to buy up debt, allowing the global currencies to devalue against them, all sorts of things. China's intervention kicks off the longest bull run in American markets ever. And of course, the way they're thanked is that the neocons realize and and I've said this before, that Mitt Romney, who was Obama's Republican opponent in the 2008 presidential election, although he's a Republican, they still have communication. I don't know how friendly they were, but certainly Mitt Romney is dripping poison into his ear and is a bridge between him and the neocons. Right. So a few other things that have happened recently is that before Trump went to China, Robert Kagan writes this piece in The Atlantic where he's saying, I mean, he says himself, you know, America's over, it's finished, but there's a like, if you don't, you know, do this. So people realize that, you know, Kagan and the neocons are putting pressure on Trump not to give up, because you can tell, you know, Trump's being pulled all sorts of ways. I think he'd rather give up and go home and basically concentrate on the midterms. But Kagan wrote that. But what people are also forgetting, that in January, Condoleezza Rice visits the White House, where she's obviously quietly putting him under heavy manners. And the idea is, you've gone this far. We didn't want you to do it this crudely. But now that you're in this far, you've crossed the Rubicon point of no return. You can't stop. You have now got to see it through. So he does that, and then he wavers again. And that's when I think Kagan, in this piece, he actually brings it into the light what they're about. So I don't think this made the neocons terribly happy, that they had to, you know, show their hand even more and tell him what to do. So having this shock in 2008, they realise that they've got to get this plan for contain, by the way, that's such a euphemism for conquest. You know? So they have to get this off the back burner, and they have to set it in motion properly. And of course, Obama is the tool. I mean, isn't that always the way? You get women if you want to oppress women, you get ethnics if you want to oppress ethnics, you get leftists if you want to oppress you know, minorities. So he does this pivot to Asia, which is very, very aggressive, and sets the whole thing in motion. All Trump does is that, you know, big idiot, he comes along and he just doubles down because this is something else I'm going to talk about in the piece that I'm writing at the moment. Rupert Murdoch's part in this, and note that the golden age with China, when there's relatively peace, coincides with Rupert's marriage to Wendy Deng, who I see as the Helen of Troy. So never mind the Thucydides Trap. I'm going to be talking about the Trojan Wars and what was happening there. And I'm sure the latecomers will, you know, be, you know, realizing that's true, and will be regurgitating that at some point. Yes. Quite soon. Yes.
I mean, via Rupert Murdoch, Australia is actually the secret hegemon of the whole world, you see.
Oh, God, yes.
The original Australian oligarch.
Oh, no, but you know, if Trump is the most powerful man in the world, Rupert Murdoch made him. So what does that make him? I don't know, Richelieu, or Kingmaker, or what? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I'm sorry. Okay.
No. I guess one of the things that I've wondered aloud about, without really being 100% clear on what the right answer is whether there is at least a group or element of Chinese sort of strategic thinking and commentary that believes it can sort of appeal to the United States' better nature and sort of, focus on partnership and help make America more like its better self, and emulate, China's role for development, and somehow sort of, I think Xi himself refers to the great ship of Chinese-US relationships and navigating that. And I do wonder sometimes whether it is a kind of a blind spot or some sort of misjudgment about the very nature of the United States, and whether it's actually, maybe a mistake that China is making in its strategic assessment of how the world is shaping up. What do you think about that?
Well, I think, they're heavy-duty Marxists. They know the way the whole system works, and that capitalism is its own gravedigger, and all that. I'm sure there are some. It's like there's a part of me that thinks this is so illogical what you're doing. It's hurting everybody, apart from that elite core. So America has obviously just given up on its own people. It's hollowed out its working and middle classes. It doesn't care what happens to them. You see the poverty and the degradation. This is all about this core enriching itself. So I think, and I sympathise with China. I'm with China on this. You have to give them the chance that they can come out this, because you never know if there was pressure from below, like all those Americans who realise they're being ripped off and they've gone on to Red Note, they've seen how Chinese actually live their lives. Maybe if there was some sort of not kickback, that's like a bribery thing, but if there's some resistance from them, and America was presented with a better way to be. Look, become part of the global community, and there's plenty for everyone to go to, for everyone to get some. There's plenty to go around. The problem is you have this hardcore of neocons and super rich who've made this. There are 3,500 billionaires in the world, and they're worth a total of about 20 trillion. And there's just this mindset. They want it all. Paul Singer actually said, he told Greg Palast, I want it all. It's there. It's like a game. They're insatiable. This is anyway, that Greek character, right? Who was cursed by the gods, who eats himself. They're all stricken with that. They want more and more and more. So how do you deal with that? It's like a sickness. It's a real illness. So Chinese, I don't think, want to rule the world, because what's in it for them? They've said they've got the example of America. What does it bring? It just brings grief. Whereas, for somebody like Xi and his peers who were in the fields, who were sent to the countryside, during the Cultural Revolution, that's not so good. But the positive thing to come out with that was they genuinely were living with the people, with the peasants, and there's another joy that communists get out of this, which is that feeling you've done something good for people. And I don't think the psychology of the American elite and the establishment understands that. And it's a shame, because it's supposed to be a Christian country, love thy neighbour as thyself, and all that. And the temple, turning over the tables in the temple. When's that going to happen? They're more into the Samson thing, aren't they, about bringing the whole temple down with them, which is a shame. So no, I don't think China wants to carve up the world. I think it sees itself in a unique position where it can lead the world into a better place, because it's just hell on earth now.
Yeah, and I guess it's that how do you confront a bully without causing a bar fight? I guess.
But they didn't cause the bar fight.
Well, I know, but it's sort of like somehow you got to diffuse the situation.
But isn't it like Lyndon Johnson said? You have to speak softly and carry a big stick. And China's learnt from the country that America that spends more on its military than the next nine nations put together. That you have to be strong. And I didn't hear anything in that speech that was threatening America. It was like, peace, harmony, we can work together, all the good things. It's only because these people are so inadequate that they can't grasp that and say, let's try working. We were working with them for a long while. Why don't we go back to that pattern? The answer to that is, and my dad drilled this into me from when I was a little girl, which is, this is how imperialism works. Do you want me to tell you the story of how my dad...
Absolutely.
Right. Well, when he was a communist, I mean, he's dead now. He's been gone since 2004, but when he was a communist, the word came from Russia under Khrushchev that the communists all over the world were supposed to make peace with imperialism, and a lot of the communist parties of different countries were doing that. You had to sign a paper, apparently, this pledge, and my dad refused because he said, when you say make peace with imperialism, how do you make peace?
So can I just clarify, Anna, this is like late 1950s, early 1960s sort of thing?
Early 1960s. So Khrushchev, and there'd been the Bay of Pigs and all that. So we nearly got, through nuclear war. And he said that there's just no logic in this because imperialism means war. How can you make peace with something that means war? Because if you're forever expanding and taking over other, people's nations and taking their stuff, how can there be peace in that? So this is something. The dynamic of imperialism is something you can never forget. If America gave up imperialism and said, okay, we're going to put all our elite in Guantanamo Bay, we're going to restructure everything, and we're going to give people their territories back, the way Britain had to, basically, with its Commonwealth, then you might be in with a chance. But at the moment, they've got this one trajectory, this tunnel vision, they've got this aim. At the end, you've got this super arc, basically. So you have various smaller arcs, and it can explore different tributaries and distributaries and go up dead ends and so on. But you have to remember, America has now given itself this super arc. Part of that is when they said they're never ever going to allow another nation like Russia had to be able to compete with them and challenge them. And another is, if you've had the shock of the 2008 great crash and you need to recapitalize, then if you're not that bright and you're only going by literally the stuff that's happened before, and you've got a model which is the Opium Wars. You saw how Britain waged the Opium Wars, and in fact that financed Britain in India as well, the whole infrastructure and its bureaucracy. And if you know that America's industries were financed by that, then let's do that again. We did it once, surely we can do it again. Unfortunately, first time is tragedy and the second time is farce and tragedy. So that's the railroad that I think we're on.
Yeah, it will be really interesting to watch this as it develops. And the discussion on various YouTube channels, has been quite interesting to watch too. And I've said with a few guests and on a few other shows that I think maybe China could do a little bit more, on the international stage. And often the response to that is, well, what do you want it to do? Fight World War III? And I think, well, I don't know, maybe there's a few more steps in between other than World War III.
Yeah, this argument came up around Venezuela, didn't it? Because there are a lot of, I have a friend in Venezuela who I spoke to regularly, and he actually ended up, he was quite hurt, and I understood it. He said, why can't they do more? Why can't they do more for us? But the problem is, if you think of how far away Venezuela is, it is in America's backyard. It's nowhere near China. What do you do realistically? You've got supply chains, you've got, you get your fleet out there, and then what? Plus the fact, you've got this big battle that's coming your way in the South China Sea, all around the Pacific. And given what Japan is doing, and the Philippines, they've got this international airport, so-called, that they're supposed to be developing in the Philippines, that was actually an American air base, and it's quite clear. So they're losing Taiwan. Taiwan isn't such a sure thing right now. So Japan's stepping into the breach. You've got that whole island chain being armed to the teeth. You got the Philippines now. I mean, how stupid is that? What they're doing? So they're offering themselves as cannon fodder for America. Japan has been seduced into it because it's now, you're not just our little sidekick. You're a partner. You're going to decide these things with us. And, Japan, which has never really apologized or had soul searching over what it did in World War II, is saying, we can make ourselves great again, and given what America did to them during the Plaza Accords during the 1980s and basically wrecked their economy, I'm just amazed that they're going along with this.
It's the whole thing of, I think Freud apparently once said to a patient, or was reputed to have said to a patient, do you want me to be helpful or effective? And maybe that's part of the issue with China now, that they have to make very fine judgments around.
But they are
there's all sorts of things they could do, but what's actually going to work, kind of thing.
But it's not that they're just doing nothing and
exactly.
And hiding. If you look at all the rail network that they've got going from Iran to China now, that's feeding. And I'm so annoyed because Europe and Britain, which was at the end of the Eurasia landmass, the railway, we actually got their first train in 2017, and then I think no more. We could have been part of that. It's prosperity through peaceful trade. That's what we were looking at. China offered to build our high-speed rail. It offered to build our nuclear power plants. It was giving us 5G, all of these things without a shot being fired. And now we've got to succumb to all this absolute nonsense. But the other thing China's doing is it's being very careful with its rare earths. It knows very well what hand it has with that. So it's using that instead of just sucking up to America and saying, "Oh no, please don't hurt us. Look here, take our rare earths." They're being really sensible about it. And also things like when they stopped Jack Ma's Ant Group IPO, which would have made Jack Ma and Ant too big to fail, and obviously he's more sympathetic to America. That would have been a horrendous Trojan Horse, full of Greek soldiers in there. So they were sensible about that. So they've done lots and lots. Now, where I share your perturbation around this is that it took until March 2020 for China to even recognize there was something wrong. I mean, I remember that I was writing, observing and yelling about this really from 2017 and really 2018, it was quite clear with the launching of the trade war that this wasn't just the trade war. None of it made sense. None of it. You know, Wall Street was saying, "What are you doing? We've never made profits as good as this." So in 2020, so they just ignored all of this. They were just pretending nothing's wrong, and being reasonable. You know, ultra reasonable. It's like, you know, stop it. They can see you're being too compliant here. You know. Liu He, the poor guy who was charged with negotiating with the Trump regime, he was being humiliated left, right, and centre. You know, come May 2019, when he arrives in Washington ready to sign this deal, and as he lands, Trump says, "Oh no, it's off. I'm not going to do that." And even Steve Mnuchin was taken by surprise. It was obvious there was a game being played. And then, like a month later, you've got the Hong Kong riots that are kicking off with the help of the National Endowment of Democracy, and we now know from when Doge or Elon Musk. I have a block on Elon Musk's name for some reason. But when he closed down USAID, and we saw what Ned had been up to, so there was that, and then there was COVID straight after. So it's one damn thing after the other, all coincidental, of course, you know. But people were asking, well, China, why aren't you saying anything? Why aren't you doing anything? And then do you remember Zhao Lijian, who was the spokesperson? He tweets, you know, he's like Toto in The Wizard of Oz, and he pulls the curtain back, and you can actually see that the Wizard of Oz is this old geezer, and he calls them out on COVID. And I've written a piece about this because it was really funny the way, having been so compliant for decades, you get one person who talks back to the hegemon, who calls them out, and suddenly the whole of the media explodes as one. Wolf warrior, you see, they're just wolf warriors. And it's like, where did that come from? This guy's given one, you know, put out one tweet, and it's like they're all ready to brand them. It's part of this character assassination as, yes, you're always argumentative, you're always aggressive, you're always hostile. So he's my hero in a way, because he broke that vacuum, and he called it like it was. And I think that was a major step for China, and it was really good for them. I think he may have got a flack for that, which I think is really sad, because I think the guy deserves a medal.
Yeah. So I guess it's going to be an open question, and I mean, it's a question worth debating, because, you know, there's always options in life. So maybe China can do more, but I guess it would be interesting to see how things develop. And it's not all going the US way. Just in the last couple of days, the opinion that, you know, India's confirmed it's not going to bother with the sort of leaders summit for the Quad. So the general discussion out of India is the Quad is pretty much, you know, a shelved project, you know, sent off to the archive somewhere.
AUKUS.
AUKUS is just an expensive waste of money by the Australian government.
Did Australia kick over the money before? Have they actually paid for the?
Oh, well, we're going to be paying for 30 years or something. It's just appalling.
It's mafia. It is such a mafia sheet.
Yeah, it's really bad. But the Quad, which is, you know, the Japan, India, Australia, US, not really alliance, but cooperative arrangement, generally seen as a China balancing strategy, has kind of gone into abeyance a little bit over the last 2 years, partly because of the way the US has acted towards India, but maybe also because India is maybe balancing against the United States with China, even perhaps in some ways. But there was another aspect of, I guess, China's political culture I was keen to talk to you about, Anna, especially since one of your internet personas is Madam Mao. Well, clearly a reference to Madam Mao, Mao's second wife, I think. And, you know, one of the key figures in the Chinese Cultural Revolution, you know, part of the Gang of Four.
Yeah. Great band.
Yeah, I remember them. And certainly in the world of geopolitical YouTube, it has a bit of a gender problem, in my experience, which I'm ever so gently trying to correct here on the Burning Archive.
Well, there you are.
but what's your assessment of, you know, do women have a significant role within the Chinese political leadership? I don't know enough of the complete range of people on the Politburo, etc., to know. But you know, is there are there issues with the role of women in Chinese politics, in your view?
Yes. Well, I mean, if you look at that table at when the Trump circus was in town, and I don't think there was one woman at that table, but it wasn't always like this. You know, this is something that's happened relatively recently. I mean, when I was growing up as a kid, the images of women in China was very much, you know, women wore white doctor's coats. You know, you were scientists. You were expected to be, you know, women hold up half the sky is basically what it boiled down to under the communists.
That was like a comment from Mao or something, wasn't it?
Yeah. Before that, you see, it sort of goes back to the Taiping Rebellion. And so this is in the mid-19th century. You had, well, women had always been powerful in the dynasties anyway, in the imperial houses, not always in a good way. You know, I think the Dowager Empress, with Puyi, she was incredibly powerful, but not particularly a positive person. But the Taiping Rebellion is really important because this is also one of the things that influenced Mao. And you had he was a Jesuit. He was a Christian. He discovered Christianity, and so you had this combination of, you know, the old Chinese culture with this new input. It was like, you know, it was fresh blood. It was a revivifying aspect of Chinese thought, and it represented the poorest, the lowest. It really was. It was a very Christ-like thing, really. And I think at one point he had something like 20 million followers. A lot of women. They banned bound feet. Women were supposed to be, you know, on an equal, more or less on an equal par with men, but in a way that was really progressive. That in the lower orders, you hadn't really seen anything like this before. Unfortunately, that gets crushed by an unholy alliance of British soldiers who were in battle with the Chinese Qing government at that time over the Opium Wars. They actually supported the Qing government, which was trying to put that down, and later on the Boxer rebellion. So you know, this progressive move was very much crushed by Britain. So the West can't get too feel too superior about that. But then you get to, you know, Mao. The women were incredibly important. The Long March, you know, you had a load of women on that. They were expected to fight. They were, you know, that they weren't dainty and bourgeois and pampered. They were expected to get down and dirty with the guys, to fight for their nation, to fight for their country. It's a shame because the Chiang Kai-shek's, like the Republic, when they fled to Taiwan, taking that, you know, they took all the best museum artifacts with them to, and a lot of them are on display in Taipei. But they also took some of the fashions that I quite like the Cheongsam. That's very much sort of Shanghai. You know, was supposed to be the Paris of the East. They'd have tea dances. They did ballroom dancing until the liberation. So when I was a kid, all I knew was the Mao suits. I rather liked them. I quite liked them. I always wanted a red guard cap. Yeah. So what you have now, and you'd started to get women breaking through. So for example, the ambassador to Britain in 2007 to 2011 was Madam Fu Ying. She was incredibly talented, and also she had great charm. She handled the British government so well. David Miliband at the time was the foreign the foreign secretary, and she also engaged with the media. You see, this is something that really annoys me, because she got out there. There's one sort of small controversy, and that is where she was living, and her daughter was out with her as well at school here. And one of the reality TVs were renting a house nearby, and it was noisy. You can imagine all these all-night parties, and she complained, and then there was this backlash in the press against her. How dare they, you know, tell us what to do? She handled that with such charm that the press were eating out of her hand. You know, she said, "Oh, of course, I love reality shows, and my daughter's here, and she loves that as well." And she was just very smart. She was so smart that they kicked her upstairs to the foreign ministry, and I think, I don't know if she's numbered. She's very high up, and it would be in Wang Yi's department. And then she was replaced by, oh my God, this guy, Liu Xiaoming, who was he was like a matinee idol, tall, very, very good looking, but just, you know, Dullsville basically. And he was kept happy because the Daily Telegraph, seeing yuan signs in their eyes and everyone thinking we're going to make a lot of money out of China, that they were allowing him to write his long boring screeds in the Telegraph. And I think they're still up on the British Embassy website. There's a page for ambassadors, so you can check out how deadly dull they were. So yeah, she was good. I was also pleased to see around 2018. It must have been after about 2020, or around that time anyway. The CGTN had this woman, Liu Xin, who's womanly, has a beautiful voice, had really intelligent. I just thought that she's such a great role model, because a lot of what you've got now is this sort of regression into childhood. All these child women who get these really high voices. It's like, don't be like that. You know, you're a woman, and just because these idiots want you to be a perpetual child woman so that you won't outshine them, you know, forget them. So there has culturally been something weird that's happened. I mean, you know, they are so beautiful. These Chinese women are just absolutely gorgeous. But their manners, you know, I would say, look to Liu Xin. That's how you should be.
It's curious. What do you think has happened there, culturally, like, or socially even? I guess, I don't know.
Well, I think there are certain males throughout the West and the East. The East are being taught bad habits, I think. You've got Western males post-Gamergate who have just regressed into this woman-hating thing. I mean, look, I'm being attacked by all these Western commentators who arrived late, who weren't around. Instead of, showing solidarity and thinking, we're on the same side, we're fighting for the same things, have turned it into a turf war. So I'm being attacked by all these commentators, some of whom actually contacted me when they first arrived to find out, to pick my brains, and I'm giving them info, and then suddenly they turn. I think this is a mark of what's happened. You see all of these, this video, the podcasts. It's only sort of this year and last year that you've seen women started to enter the scene. For several years, it's been all guys. They don't know what they're talking about a lot of the time. They sort of bone up on their a few facts. They read the headlines, and they're operating from these headlines. And a lot of it now is obviously helped by AI. And there's real hostility towards women who might know more than them, who, have something to pass on. So instead of being, decent guys about it and just sharing and being brotherly about it, it's like crush, kill, destroy from them. So I think what you're seeing is Chinese people who, after all, China is only about 50 years into this modern era. It went through all that hell of the century was over a century of humiliation, the civil war, the poverty, cultural revolution and all that. They're starting to find their feet, and they're looking around at the cultures and the societies who did do better than them. And unfortunately, you've got these people who are just giving them the wrong signals and the wrong messages all the time. Yes, it is okay to behave like this. Of course you should be hostile towards women who are uppity and speak out of turn. And it's a horrific thing, and I also think within, China's not monolithic. It's you have different wings. You've got a bourgeois wing there. You've got a potential what's it called? A fifth
column.
Fifth column, thank you.
Yeah.
A fifth column that would happily, for their own benefit, sell out to America. Then you've got the bulk of people who I think just want to live a decent life and, live it well and be generous. And there is a kindness there towards, people in Africa and the global south and so on. And then you've got the people who know about communism. And I am actually assured by somebody who said that they do, in government, they do talk about the possibility of which way it can go. But there are people inside the Chinese government who sort of, they have a collective memory of what it was like before, what it could go back to. And they absolutely, I think the impression I got was it's going to be over their dead bodies that they're going to allow that to happen again. So the petty bourgeoisie who now seem to be, dominating the discourse, we know which side that they're on, because only a few years ago they either just weren't aware at all, or they were actually siding with the power. And I just think that is such a low level way to be. They can't transcend their own personal needs. They have no insight. They have no introspection. And quite frankly, I don't think they're that intelligent.
Well, thank God for your participation in the sphere, but I mean, it's going to be an interesting issue to watch, really, I guess, and how that sort of shapes up over the next, period of time. Because clearly, China's affected by all the social dynamics that affect every society, and of course, women in political leadership roles, broader leadership roles. the whole, American manosphere weirdness of the last few years. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it's just really weird stuff.
And you look at the Trump women who
Yeah,
have to mutilate themselves in
yeah,
plastic surgery to look a certain way, I think, to make up for what they're lacking inside. I think in the West, everyone's spirit is being killed off for
yeah,
mammon, but
yeah,
basically. And I think I wish and I hope that American women, Western women in Britain, I hope that they manage to see through this. These values, these are just baubles.
yeah,
Find yourselves and fight back. So I
yeah.
think if we start to see Chinese women, doing that, I think that's going to be such a great sign that they're still
Yeah.
on the right track.
So that might be a nice bridge too, because of course, there's lots of issues with leadership in Western societies at the moment, including, of course, in the society that you live in Britain, where there is a huge, well, look at watching from the former colony of Australia, what appears to be a huge political crisis. I remember when Australia was going through the sort of Rudd Gillard years where there was, a leadership coup every 6 months. The British press would have a heyday about describing, Australia as coup capital of the world. And we're sort of getting our revenge back now. What exactly is happening there in British politics with Keir Starmer and co at the moment?
Well, remember that Starmer only got in because people were really sick and tired of the Tories, who we regarded as dangerous, and who hated people. He got in with a lower share of the vote than Corbyn had in 2017. He and Labour together, which is sort of allied with Israel and Labour Friends of Israel, really did the dirty on Corbyn. But Corbyn sort of brought this on himself. In 2017, Corbyn was the head of the biggest political party in Europe. I think there was something like 500,000 members at one point. Now, what he had done is he'd taken the side of Brexit, and the far right here and a lot of the left were wanted Brexit. Now, Brexit, the EU, yes, it's horrible. It's run by bankers. They did awful things to Greece. They, pauperized a lot of countries. They bankrupted, various entities. But Corbyn's constituency, the Labour constituency, 70% of them supported Remain and reform from within. The majority of young people who knew the danger this was represented to their future were for Remain. The majority of ethnic minorities in Britain were for Remain, because Brexit also was sold on othering people and creating this division in society between those of us who really belong here and we're taking back control, and they came from Europe, and European white people were regarded as foreigners by people like Farage and his Brexit people. So the left, who took the Lexit line, I think really sold working people down the pan, because yes, of course there were problems with EU.
What was Lexit? Did you say
Leave.
Lexit?
It's left exit. So
left
Brexit
exit. Okay.
is
Yep.
was leave the EU. Lexit is all these left people, including Corbyn and people around him, against the majority of his own constituency, because they were about to get in with a landslide. All the polls were saying, the closer we got to the date, the polls were shocking the right wing and the establishment, because, oh my God, he's actually in with a chance. He might get there. Now, I think that there was a lot of pantomiming on the left. I don't think Corbyn actually wanted to be Prime Minister because, look, for example, more recently, Sarah Sultana, who kicked your party into being, she had to drag him kicking and screaming into your party. And I think this is because he didn't want to be. It's only an accident because the anti-Iraq war movement had suddenly taken off, and he found himself thrust into the spotlight in a way he wasn't expecting. As I say, it was like, at times, it like strapping El Cid's corpse to a horse and slapping it into battle. So 2017 was the time that we could have taken power. And I said at the time as well, this is your chance. You have to take power, because otherwise the forces of reaction, they're watching this. They're absolutely shocked. They hate you. They hate us, the, hoi polloi. They're going to get their act together. Just because we've taken them by surprise this time doesn't mean to say that's going to be forever. So it's very important, whether he supported Brexit or Remain, he needed to get into power, and then we could have argued it out. So what happened was, really close up in the days before the election, and I was hearing this from canvassers on the doorstep, suddenly there was a change. There was a chill in the air. The people who'd been absolutely gung-ho, they absolutely wanted Corbyn and Labour to win. Suddenly they weren't so sure, and the thing that they kept bringing up was, but he's for Brexit now, because the argument was people did not want a hard Brexit, and it's like Britain had woken up with a hangover, and there was talk of rejoining or not, because this was before the final exit, which was in, I think, January 2020. So there was still a bit of time to play around. So what happened? His lieutenants were briefing the press that actually Jeremy is for Brexit. And he'd already triggered Article 50 as the leader of the opposition, which we didn't want. He almost lost it at that point as well. So they kept this up. And I still have arguments with leftists who are saying, oh, it's because he entertained the idea of Remain. Well, that is absolutely not the case. It was because he looked like our last defence against jumping out of the EU frying pan and into the American fire, because that's what it meant. Instead of taking back control and being a big fish in a small pond of the EU, we would suddenly be cut loose so that Nigel Farage's friends in America could do even more damage. So Labour ends up losing that vote. So going from a landslide to losing by 3,000 votes. That's how close it was that we could have won that. So then what happens is Starmer comes along and makes all these promises that yes, he'll continue all the positive stuff, the looking after the working class constituency. But we have to change from, we can't have Corbyn anymore. He's the one who lost it for us. So there's all this, these lies being told, these briefings that are going on. Starmer is supported by Labour Together. And I think, he's actually in the Labour Friends of Israel. As soon as he gets in, so as soon as he gets power, he gets voted in by the Labour Party. He starts breaking his promises all the time. So that brings us to date. That's who we've got. The guy who brought in Palantir and BlackRock into Downing Street. The guy who's gone back on all his promises. The guy who was really cooperating with the attacks on Gaza, giving logistics and other support. the little glimmer of hope was that he said no to Trump over Iran, because I think even Starmer wasn't so stupid as to not understand that that was, don't even go there. But we know that he's giving support in other ways. So we're left with someone who is pretty loathed anyway, who stabbed the electorate in the back, stabbed Corbyn in the back, because at one point he was masquerading as a friend of Corbyn, not quite as extreme as Corbyn, but he understood where Corbyn's support was coming from. So he's been awful. So the it's a crisis. It's only a crisis in the sense that they need to get a new leader. But the problem is, Corbyn is no longer in the Labour Party. He was basically kicked out, and he's an independent. And I don't think he would have been so brilliant anyway. I think he wouldn't have been too happy with the prospect of, oh no, not me again. And you've got these other people who are essentially Blairites now surfacing. I mean, Andy Burnham did quite well under Brown. He's not quite as bad as Wes Streeting, but not brilliant either. So the crisis is you have no one who can take over Labour, and put it back on the path, which you can't, you can't really do that now anyway. And remember that in British politics, the tension was always between capital and Labour. And Labour was set up by the trade unions as a balance, but also eventually it was a sort of outlet. So in case people were seduced by what the Soviet Union had to offer, it meant that you had, no, we can give you the, National Health Service and so on. So that, that was from the National Health Service to what we have now, handing it over to Palantir.
Oh. So is a likely outcome that Starmer will remain because none of the alternatives have quite enough support or are compelling enough, and you sort of get into this sort of I don't know how to describe it, but a sort of
dead man walking.
Sort of stuck in this situation, because beyond the individual leader issue, I mean, there's sort of party political structure there in the US, in Britain, in another US colony. You've got the first past the post system, a wildly disproportionate representation of the governing party, given it's basically a third of the vote, but much more of the parliamentary seats just as a result of the electoral system, and a system where it's very hard to get sort of new parties having any sort of success, tendency to cling to things. But there are these other parties emerging on the right. I don't know too much about
Green. There's
the
Green
Greens
and
the Reform, yeah. But they must face an awful lot of. I mean, the odds of them getting significant representation in Parliament must be reasonably low.
Well, I think it's not a level playing field anyway. So you're critical of first past the post, but if you have the other system, sorry, what's it? Be my extra brain here. Please.
Proportional representation or something like that. Yeah.
If you have proportional representation, it means that Reform, which already looks as if that it's quite likely that they're going to get in, it would give them an even stronger chance of getting his. I mean, the thing is, unless you have a level playing field and the media is representing everyone, no one's making an informed vote. So that's what we're up against. We're up against a Labour Party system that has been taken over by Labour Together, oh, there's one channel that's done such a great report on this. Down, I'll have to get it to you later. You know, where they've absolutely been forensic and just looked at what Labour together and McSweeney and the others have been doing, and it's just such a colossal stitch up. So you know, we vote once every 4 years, and then we're forgotten about, and everyone lies. You know, anyway. So the working class is not being represented. We've been convinced somehow that all our problems are due to immigrants, and some of us were actually saying at the time of Brexit, we're going to be suffering here. We've lost like 140 billion a year from lost trade with Europe. But no, it's not the, you know, these people like Farage's fault. It's not the establishment's fault. It's these poor guys getting over here on boats, you know, across the channel, risking their lives. And now it's even a lot of the left are going along with this immigration thing. You know, they're not the enemy. In fact, I think it's 25 billion a year is what migrants actually add to the treasury. So they're a net gain, not a loss.
Yeah. And I mean, like, Australia's very high migrant population.
You're all more migrants.
Yeah. I think it's like 50% of the country has at least one parent born overseas, and I think something like a third of the country maybe, you know, directly born overseas or something like that. It is just ubiquitous in the actual migrant intake. But I mean, there's been similar sort of debates here in Australia. But in my time in government, I actually dealt with, you know, one of the world's leading demographers, and you know, the positive effects of migration are just, you know, incontrovertible, really. so much of the debate around migration, especially from an Australian point of view, that seems to occur in Britain and Europe, United States, just seems so incredibly retrograde. But you know,
but it's especially weird in Australia and America, surely, because it's like, you know, the native peoples who were there, and it's only like the last, was it 400 years? You know.
Yeah. But there has been a bit of excitement in some quarters here in Australia about the performance of the Greens in Britain. But do they represent any sort of real alternative, do you think, or what, or you know, where is do you see any sort of hope out of the British political crisis, or is it just going to sort of muddle along?
I think they represent the best hope, but it is a system in decline and falling apart, as Marx said it would. It contains its own grave digger, remember. But no, I think Greens, also a lot of the Greens are very anti-China. I mean, horrifically so. You know, that they take the Washington line on Xinjiang and Hong Kong and basically everything. Hopefully there's this new guy, Polanski. I haven't heard him being too negative about China. You know, I mean, even Starmer realised that he had to go and visit China and try and get some sort of trade underway. The reform, the atmosphere is so horrendous. There's been such a horrific right-wing, I don't know, just gathering of forces that I think they're going to storm it, and those of us who are sort of wet lefties are going to end up voting for the Greens. But you know, when Blair, so this essay that he wrote,
you mentioned this essay by Tony Blair that's just come out earlier on in the program. Tell us about that.
It's 5,500 words, reminding you what an absolute, I don't want to swear, an absolute horror. He was, you know, from you know, he got in 1997. We were also pleased that he got in after 18 years of the Tories, and then very quickly he towed the Bush line, takes us into an illegal war in Iraq, and then gets paid about $2.5 million a year by J.P. Morgan. From 20, there was about an 8-year period when he was getting this fee, and various other ways that he was getting paid off. And J.P. Morgan, by the way, this is significant because J.P. Morgan was the bank that was granted pole position after the West victory in Iraq to extract the wealth.
Okay. Yeah.
So there are lots of banks and lots of institutions that are absolutely, you know, making off like bandits. But it's J.P. Morgan that's the one that coordinates the whole thing. So Blair gets paid all this money. He falls foul of Murdoch, which I'm going to do in this thing that I'm supposed to be that I'll be recording. He's out in the wilderness for ages and ages, and it's almost like now he's like a made man. You know, we'll do this for you, Tony, but at some point we're going to call in our debt. Like every now and again he has to do this. He did it over the climate change Copenhagen summit, and now he seems to be doing it again because he's wading into this leadership contest. But what he's saying is whoever wins it has to keep doing America's bidding, despite everything we know. And remember this guy, he is somebody, even when Starmer and Europe were staying out of the Board of Peace, which apparently there's $70 billion that hasn't been paid into it, that's supposed to go into Trump's coffers. You know, trust Blair to be the one person who joins that, and he's hoping to put together this Riviera.
He was going to be the proconsul of Gaza, wasn't he?
Yes, yeah, exactly. I mean, this guy is an absolute nightmare. But what he's doing is he's hammering home the neocon instructions that you saw from Condoleezza Rice and Robert Kagan and all the others, like, you know, Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz and that, who were telling Trump, you know, what is it? Screw your metal to the sticking place, or whatever. I've got to look up the Hamlet quote.
Screw your courage to the sticking place, I think it is.
Thank you. Screw your courage to
Lady Macbeth. Yep.
Yeah. So that's what they're there to tell him. But if you read this document that he's just written, and I've got to say, he's being given an absolute pounding by everyone all over Labour, that he's really despised. I can't tell you, he has no respect whatsoever. But do you remember what I was saying, that America and the West financed its industrial revolutions that put them in, you know, top position through the Opium Wars, right? And that's what they're doing again. This is Opium Wars 2 that they're getting going. And Tony sort of confirms that, because he says at one point, and this, you know, I started at this, and is it right that we're living through the 21st century equivalent of the 19th century industrial revolution? And if so, are we remotely meeting the scale of that challenge? Well, there's an admission. It's like they realise, they know they are back there.
Yeah.
The press won't get this because they don't understand the whole Opium Wars thing. So how did Europe and America meet the scale of that challenge the first time round in the 19th century? Well, we know they put China through absolute misery. They carved off chunks. Hong Kong got carved off. Macau did as well, but went back before Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And what he does, there's carrot and stick. He uses this fear and also this blandishment. And what are the opportunities in areas like health and education, for transformative change. So if you behave yourself, if you go along with it, British people, you'll get your health service working better, even though Palantir's running it. And then he talks about the exit, but there are the existential dangers of the AI revolution. So the only way out of this mess is if you go along with Opium Wars 2. What is power derived from the strength of a country's economy and the strength of its military capacity? There they are trying to turn Europe and Britain and everyone into this Death Star, and what Nell and I have been discussing the whole bunker state and that, and this Death Star, which is we've sheared off from the people. We don't care about you. We're just going to make sure that the core elite is there and it survives. And that's why they don't care how devastating the consequences are, because they're going to be okay in their luxury bunkers.
This is an astonishing argument. I mean, I guess, it's astonishing in its brazenness, if not in its content. But it sort of reminds me too, I remember at some point Adam Tooze, who's a very ambiguous thinker in many ways, depending on his audience a little bit, but he made a comment about one of the things about British foreign policy post-Brexit was it had lost all its diplomatic and economic sort of influence in Europe. And so for it to play any sort of significant role in Europe, it had to do it through NATO and military means.
Yeah.
And so in a way, Brexit also underpins or reinforces, existing tendency to be heavily involved in Europe, particularly with the Eastern European countries, and also, therefore, both the American and British sort of aggression towards both Russia and I guess also China as well. But this sort of militarization logic is deeply concerning. And as you say, it is reminiscent of Opium Wars too.
It's absolutely, I've said all the way along, this is the Viking raiding party. That they're all getting together. No one believed me. And here they are. And he's saying the New World Order is the product of a risen China, a rising India, a newly militaristic Russia. Oh, not Israel or America then,
no.
And emerging significant power blocks in the Gulf. So this is the shifting pattern of power that we have to throw ourselves into to defeat. It's like, and he also says at one point that we need ideas. What we're not getting is the discussion. We're not getting complex ideas. Well, the complex, not so complex ideas that I would like them to discuss honestly is another way out of this problem is cheap energy from Russia and peaceful trade with China. Why don't you put that in your opium pipe and smoke it, Tony? But they won't.
Well, that is such a wonderful assessment of the issue. That seems to sum it up, really, doesn't it? I think it really does. So that's a great conclusion, I think, to a fantastic conversation, Anna. We've discussed China, we've discussed Britain, and we've discussed the overall situation right now as Opium Wars do. And what's more, we've actually got a solution to the world as well.
Yes, it's there in front of you. Don't be stupid.
Don't be stupid. It's not so much keep it simple, stupid, as don't be stupid.
The problem is the problem is that we've talked about Homer, ancient classics, but unfortunately for America, the only Homer that they know is Homer Simpson.
Which From Memory is also another Rupert Murdoch product. So there we go. Australia's control of
But they
American
bit the
culture
hand
comes
that fed, I think.
Awesome, Anna. So maybe just as we wrap up, do you just want to remind everyone about where they can read your work and watch your work on both Substack and YouTube or the broader internet?
Thank you. Everything is on annachen.co.uk. That's my website. If you want to check any of this out, including the mega shakedown timeline or the mega COVID timeline, which I think people will find surprising, or just my China page. So annachen.co.uk or on YouTube, I think it's Madam Mao on there. And of course, with you on Substack.
Yep. And I'll include links to all of those in the video description. And thank you for joining me this hot British summer day and this early Melbourne morning here in Australia. Thanks,
Anna. Great pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, Jeff. Really enjoyed it.